Y damos pie en este momento para iniciar con el programa de Construyendo el futuro de la inteligencia artificial. Buenos días a todos. El día de hoy, con mucha emoción, tengo el honor de presentarles a una destacada pionera de la fusión de la arquitectura con la inteligencia artificial. Ella es Chantal Matar. Su renombre en el ámbito del diseño generativo y su audaz aplicación de la inteligencia artificial en la arquitectura la sitúan como una de las líderes indiscutibles en este campo emergente. Egresada con honores de la Universidad Libanesa, Chantal ha impreso su visión en despachos de talla mundial como son Zaha Hadid Architects, Bernard Curie Architects y Atelier des Architects. Su legado educativo es palpable, siendo mentora y guía de instituciones académicas de prestigio. Además de su notable trayectoria individual, Chantal ha tenido el privilegio de colaborar con luminarias de este mundo visionario como son Tim Fu y Arturo Tedeschi, reforzando su posición como figura central en esta revolución arquitectónica. Chantal tiene una profunda pasión por entrelazar la creatividad con la experiencia técnica. Está a la vanguardia de la exploración de cómo la inteligencia artificial puede transformar la forma en que conceptualizamos, diseñamos y construimos espacios. Sus investigaciones han resultado en avances revolucionarios en el diseño generativo, la transformación de espacios y la creación de entornos virtuales. Su enfoque multidisciplinario ha permitido crear soluciones que desafían los límites tradicionales de la arquitectura. En resumen, Chantal es una líder en el mundo de la arquitectura y la inteligencia artificial, cuya experiencia y visión están enriqueciendo nuestra comprensión de lo que es posible en la intersección de estos dos campos. Estamos ansiosos por escuchar la conferencia de Chantal Matar, Building Brilliance, the AI Revolution in Architectural Innovation, en la cual nos sumergirá en las profundidades de cómo la inteligencia artificial está redefiniendo el arte y el diseño arquitectónico contemporáneo, fusionando espacios funcionales y estéticamente sorprendentes con una visión provocadora y estimulante, y cómo la tecnología puede transformar la forma en que imaginamos y creamos espacios. Gracias por su atención y esperamos un día lleno de aprendizaje y de inspiración.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Irma, for the introduction and for the invite as well. I'm super happy to be here. This is my first time in Mexico. And yeah, just thank you everyone as well for being here. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. So first, as Irma was mentioning, I'm an architect originally, and I've been practicing for the last 14 years. And recently I've been with Zaha Hadid Architects. And for the last year, I started off on my own company. And we've been doing different research into AI and architecture, and also art installations and exhibitions and architecture competitions. So the journey I'm going to be showing you today, first I'm going to focus on my background. I'm from Beirut originally. And I have a couple of projects I want to show first that shaped me as an architect today. Next, okay. Okay. I start off with this image. Back in the 1960s, Beirut, everywhere in the magazines, was known to be in this form, which is sadly during the war. So for some reason, there's a sort of attractiveness in this image, sadly, and at the same time, there's a sad truth behind what was going on back then. And then a few years forward, this is Beirut in 2019. All prosperous, super modern, a lot of things happening, amazing nightlife, culture, history. Everything is going positively good. And then we move on to 2020 with this mass explosion, and Beirut is on the ground again. So you see like this up and down. Beirut is always in constant reconstruction, destruction. And the reason why I wanted to show this is because one of the projects I worked on earlier in Beirut. So Beirut is a city in the making. The image of the crane is very much in tune with the next project. This is one of the earlier projects I worked on back in 2011 with Bernard Curie Architects. I was the main project leader on that one, and the idea was mainly to represent the concept of Beirut in reconstruction all the time. And one of the concepts was to keep the crane as part of the project itself. So it's not just a structural element in terms of the construction phase, it's also part of the concept and the design. It's a bit interesting idea, but it was quite challenging structurally to keep the crane, but we managed, after all, to maintain it as part of the main concept. This is evolutionary images showing just the different massing. Basically, the project is a hotel, a residential complex, and a little retail complex at the bottom to the right. And the idea is to highlight that Beirut is always in the making, always in construction. And this is one of the platforms at the top, the bridges, to show the skyline of Beirut, which is also quite diverse. You have a lot of skyrise, and then you have a lot of historical, traditional architecture embedded into the urban scale. Moving on. This is another picture of the project. Nowadays, it's been completed. And you'll notice that one of the fun elements of the design was to keep this idea of, so it was quite provocative, the design. So the idea is to keep the security concept, because there's a lot of security issues and phobia in general. So we wanted to keep the cameras as part of the concept itself. So you notice that they are part of the embedded structure at the middle point of the high-rise. Okay. This is another project too that shaped me as well. The idea is to how to conform with the building regulations that we have while maintaining an out-of-the-box concept. So in the planning that you're going to see next, this is, for example, the site. And because there was a lot of restrictions in terms of planning application and building regulations, we used the whole site, and then we we offset it from the site to create the concept while maintaining and conforming with the building regulations. So we wanted to think outside the box while being in the box at the same time. This is a residential complex in Beirut. This is one of the recent, it's already been completed. The idea is to keep 360 degrees views all over Beirut while maintaining the whole site as part of the planning. And it was quite luxurious complex with a lot of double heights and mezzanines, etc. This is also another example. It's quite, might look a little bit aggressive on the sides, but the idea is to keep using as much as possible the plot while maintaining an interesting concept. Now, moving on from real projects with the big question of AI, how is AI going to shape the future, how we're actually using it in architecture, how it is actually replacing jobs, etc. So there's endless of questions that need to be addressed. And I'm going to take you on a journey. Hopefully that will instigate some of the questions in your mind. First, I'm going to go through the chronological order. So AI, in general, is not a new idea. It's been on since 1956. So this is where the generation of the AI concept came into place. And then with time, you'll see, for example, in the 90s, the second AI winter, which is hard for beginners, limited funds for development. So it was already in motion, but it hasn't been already available for everybody to use it in different sectors. So we're going to see today and the next days the different application of AI in different majors. So what I'm going to be focusing today is on design and immersive spaces and how we're actually using it to create new ways of thinking about architecture and how we can employ it into creating real-life projects. So going on to the present, we are now in the deep learning phase, the advanced machine theory. Okay, this is an interesting image I found recently, which kind of made me think about things. So this is an image from a journal, math teachers protesting against calculator use. So imagine, back in 1988, we were talking about banning calculators. So similar to today, we're actually talking about possibly banning ChatGPT or controlling the use of ChatGPT. especially in education, etc. So we are kind of in the similar mindset, but in a different timeline. So it's all an evolution, in my opinion. We're now living in another era of designing, or even in medicine, in law, etc. So it is a tool that we need to use, and we need to get the best out of it while not abusing a lot of other quota, a lot of law situations. So there is quite a lot of question marks to address. Next. Okay. This is a list of the top 10 developers of generative AI models. This data is from January 2023. So these are the front runners using or creating different platforms for artificial intelligence. So we have Google at the forefront, Meta, OpenAI, etc., Microsoft. And now we move on to what is artificial intelligence. So there is this notion of a little bit of confusion between machine learning, AI. What is it? Is it the same thing? Is it not the same thing? Basically, the whole concept of deep learning and machine learning, they all fall into the AI platform. So AI is like the global ensemble, if you want to call it. It's development of smart systems and machines that can carry out tasks that typically require human intelligence. And machine learning is a subcategory, it's the first layer inside AI, which is creating algorithm that can learn from data, your data, and make decisions based on patterns observed. But at the end of the day, it always requires a human intervention. So there is judgment from our side, we still need to control it. Deep learning, on the other side, is similar, but at the same time, it's actually not using human intervention. It's a bit more developed. So this is where we are right now. We're getting into deep learning. We're getting the machine to actually learn from our data and create new sets without our intervention. So I have a very short clip. Now we're getting into media. So I also use a lot of media in my work. I try to mix media and architecture. This is an example of an ad. And I'll let you watch it first, then I'll explain what it is. Audio. Rewind and audio, please.
Great. So come, celebrate
your anniversary.
Hi, it's me, Jennifer Lopez, Chief Celebration Officer of Virgin Voyages, here to invite you to celebrate. So come,
Celebrate your anniversary, your birthday, or just generally being fabulous.
Really, Kyle?
It's good, right?
Gen AI is supposed to be inviting people to Virgin Voyages, not doing whatever that was. You know, just give me that.
As I was saying, why not celebrate on an
award-winning voyage
with Michelin-starred, chef-curated menus?
World-class destinations, award-winning...
Boring. I'll hop in there. I'll hop right in that suit.
So supple.
I can't watch this. Give it to me. There's no kids here. That's all you need to know.
No kids!
Oh, can I live there?
Gen AI. Invite your crew to voyage. Create your custom invite at virginvoyages.com.
It's not just a yacht, it's a super yacht.
So interesting.
Hi,
also quite funny.
it's me, Jennifer Lopez.
Thank you, Jennifer. So the idea is that using AI, so this is all AI-based, just mapping Jennifer Lopez or any other actor or artist, you can now create ads or even movies from that like physique or the information, the digital information of that persona. So it puts a lot of question marks for the future, like what is the future of movies, for example, in general? Are we gonna be able to use actors anymore? We don't need them anymore. We can just use AI to create movies, to create ads. I mean, the list is endless, but it is a huge question mark. So that was not Jennifer Lopez, obviously. That was an AI imitating her physique, which is pretty insane to think about. So it makes you question, is this the only role that we won't mind being disrupted? So I'll leave it at that question mark. I have another example. This is another example. It's also a very short film made using AI text to video, which is recreating, I mean, you can create very strange concepts now using AI. There's no limits. You can merge different ideas and create stuff that you actually wouldn't think about as you're using standard tools. This is an example of a very short animation creating. So the script was creating with ChatGPT. And then there's 3 custom voices also using AI. They were created using 11 labs. Then there's 500 shots with Runway, machine learning platform, which creates videos, 4-second clips based from a text. So the idea is that that specific artist, for example, used Christian Fleischer, used 4-second frames from Runway, creating from the same prompt, creating different frames, and then editing them all together to create that movie. So everything is edited in Adobe Premiere, but even the music is also done using AI. So without further ado, I'll let you enjoy that short movie. Okay.
In a world of glamour and intrigue, where nothing is quite as it seems, one chance encounter leads to a night of unforgettable adventure and romance.
The music, the atmosphere, it's like stepping into a whimsical dream.
Care to dance and make this dream even more enchanting, madame?
Featuring stunning dance performances, unexpected twists, and a touch of feline elegance. This whimsical and captivating romantic comedy set in the glamorous 1930s era is sure to sweep you off your feet.
This night just keeps getting more and more peculiar.
Well, they do say that curiosity killed the cat. But in this case, it seems to have given it a double life.
From the visionary creator of Taste of Duality comes a movie that will leave you spellbound and craving more. Get ready to experience the magic of The Great Cat Spy. A celebration of passion, humor, and the pursuit of the perfect romance. Coming soon to a screen near you.
Hear the purr. It's quite calming. I mean, it's quite strange, but at the same time, it's interesting that you can combine different concepts and create short movies for. The sky is not limited, actually. There's no limit anymore. So next. Okay. This is something I simulated as well. It's architectural fluid forms morphing into space in New York City. And it's also very short, so I'll show you that. This is the same concept, text to video, also creating movies from text, but this is more on an architectural spectrum. That was a very experimental video, just showing different fluid spaces, how they're morphing. It's still on the media aspect, and also using text to video with AI, There's still, so far, it's still in development, but the resolution is getting better with time. So the more they're training the models, the more we're getting much more higher resolution for the film. And but there is something quite charming, actually, with the imperfection of anything created using AI at this stage, especially with Midjourney originally last year. I think it's been since last June, and we're already talking about this. So it's speeding so fast, this technology, and it's quite overwhelming being in this era. And yeah, sorry, next. So now I'm going to move on to stills. I'm going to talk a little bit about, for me, how I find the AI and the design industry being very positive at this stage. So there's a lot of negatives, obviously, because it's new technology. There's a lot of question marks. But I want to focus a bit more on the positive sides and how we're actually using this to benefit us as designers, as artists, as architects. And I'm going to focus first on creativity, which is a big plus. And the comparison I always like to use, okay, press next, is Jackson Pollock, for example. So I'm going to talk specifically about Midjourney. I use a lot Midjourney. There's a lot of platforms. So for anyone who's not very familiar with different platforms to create images from text, Midjourney is one of these platforms which is highly used and is very successful, in my opinion, into creating a very intricate and interesting visuals from text. And it's actually quite more creative than the other platforms I've used, like DALL-E, etc. So I find Midjourney very interesting. And the reason why I want to talk about Jackson Pollock specifically is because I always get asked, who owns this at the end? What am I doing? Am I actually creating this, or is it the machine who's creating this? I would say it's a teamwork at the end of the day. It's your own input. I'll talk later about control, how much you can control the data. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about randomness in art. Like when you're writing something into this machine, you're getting something quite random. You don't know what you're actually getting. I mean, if you use the same prompt or the same text to get a specific visual, you might get a different, you will get, not might, it's 100% sure, you will get a different outcome while using the same text. So, I mean, similar to Jackson Pollock, I would like to say that whenever you're creating an art piece, you're actually expressing something from your inner self, and he lets his brushstroke just paint anything depending on what he feels like. So it's actually an expression of himself. In some form of similarity, you're creating visuals from words. So you're using your literature, you're using your imagination, which is very important, your vision. I think vision is the most important part of all these tools. So the wider the vision you have, or the more bold you are, or the more experimental you are with concepts, the more original ideas or visuals you will get from your own thoughts. Okay. And now these are some very short examples of the stuff that I've been using, and I've done with using Midjourney. So this is an interior space using fractal 3D parametric walls. So, for example, the image to the right is using Arabic calligraphy with fractals at the same time to create, just on the visual sense, it's a bit more aesthetic at this stage. So I'm just trying to create fractals and parametric walls based on that natural element. And using Midjourney, I was able to create tons based on that simple concept, and also very diverse results. Another thing about using AI and still imagery and trying to create concepts and new ideas, using Midjourney, for example, is the emotion part of it. So the emotion part of the design, it's not something you can acquire using standard 3D modeling tools. So for example, smoke or water or fluids, you cannot really model this quite easily using Maya or 3D Max or etc. I mean, using AI, you're able to see things, you're not really perceptive of them directly using standard tools. So this is an example of a smoke fluid interior, which is, I find quite fascinating that you'll be able to get to that level that fast and quite bold ideas. Another example of similar, talking about fractals, this is on an urban scale. It looks a bit more futuristic, surreal, utopian, not really realistic. But we're talking still about concepts and challenging our ideas and our just making our mind works and trying to challenge the vision to go even further to get unrealistic results. So the image to the right at the top is an interior based on the same fractal essence. and similar to the one below. Another thing I wanted to take, I like photography as well, and I found that using AI, I know a lot of photographers are not going to agree with me, but I mean, for me, I'm just experimenting with the tool, and I find it quite futuristic in that sense that the resolution is very interesting, and also the creativity is being deployed is actually quite mesmerizing, for me at least. I find it quite interesting for photography to create these. Now, getting more control. So this was a bit more on the randomness, and you can create beautiful imagery endlessly using AI. Obviously, there's no end to what you can create. But we're going to the next phase. So for me, I wanted to get more control over what I'm trying to get to. And this is where I started using some of my own data to create visuals or ideas. Ideation. We're still talking about concepts at this stage, but from the side that using your own data set instead of you don't know what's actually been deployed in Midjourney or DALI, etc. We have no idea what the amount of library that's being used or if they have consent of the other artists that's actually they're using as a part of their library. So from that point, I wanted to create something from my own work. So this is a painting that I've done a while ago using acrylic. It's acrylic fluid art. And I included that into my data set using Midjourney, and I was able to recreate from that specific painting different interscalar experiments. So this is, for example, on an interior scale. I'm still talking about 3D parametric walls. So from that painting, I was able to see how it can be translated into interior space. And that was one of the many examples, of course. Another example is using that same library for a different scale. This is on an urban scale, also using the same painting. I was able to perceive it on an urban scale, which is, for me, it was quite fascinating that I can actually, in such a short amount of time, see something analog being digital in such a short time and on a larger scale. This is an example of, so the image to the right is a render of a 3D model I did using Houdini, which is a 3D modeling software. The video to the left is showing the process quite quickly. The idea is, I mean, nature is always embedded into my designs. This is a stalactitic and stalagmitic geological formation that I wanted to model it as 3D model using Houdini, and I was able to replicate it using Vectorworks and Trails. And the reason why I wanted to show this is because I used this specific model to create different interior scenes. I wanted to see to what level I can actually translate that into an interior design space. So that was based on that specific library. So I was quite happy because I was finally using my own, my own library into designing different spaces and trying to work with the tool to see to what extent I can get interesting results. For me, it's also the options I can get. So it really makes your mind go further and further. So the more you're trying, the more you're doing different options using, for example, your own data, the more interesting spaces you get into. This is another example of some interior spaces. They're still a little bit on the surreal side of things, but it's still quite interesting to see the employment, the use of your data into different spaces. That one as well. Still the same model being used. So we're moving on. So that was just a few examples of how you can employ your own data and create new scenes, new spaces, different scales. So there's really no end to experimentation, as Zaha Hadid said. But we're moving on now to machine learning, to GANs and NERFs. So it sounds a bit strange, might be to some people, but I'll explain in a bit what it is. The reason why I wanted to show this is because I wanted to move on from the 2D realm. So all these beautiful imagery, interesting concepts, they open dialogues, they make you question things, they make you go back and forth. And if you're trying to design something, or you're still on the concept stage, basically. It's all about the concept so far. So now we're moving on into the 3D space. So I wanted to even push it further and try to get a 3D model finally from all this experimentation. And I fell into the rabbit hole of all this research. I mean, out of my curiosity, I wanted to see further from this. And then I built on my own a training set based on OpenAI Point E model, which is a text to 3D model. Sounds a bit interesting, but at the same time sounds a bit scary because people say, oh, we're not going to use architects in the future, but that's not the case. It's just the roles are going to be different, but that's a different topic. So this is a text to 3D model. It's still very early stages. It's not super mature yet, the model, but at least, I mean, you can see this is, for example, the text was a red couch, and I was able to get a 3D model from that text in a matter of seconds, which is, the technology is super exciting. It's very interesting. It's not perfect yet, the outcome, but the fact that we're actually being able to get to this stage at this speed is actually very interesting. So things are going to be developing even further than this, and hopefully in the future you'll be able to, using your own data, to create 3D models. I think, personally, this is what's going to happen, but it's open for debate. And yeah, so this is a simple example. So you can see that the couch is not fully perfect. There's a little bit of a curve, but there's something quite, again, charming about these imperfections, I think. This is also using Point E OpenAI. There's also Shape E now, which you can do the same thing as well. This is using an image and creating a 3D model from that image. It's also quite forward-thinking that we're actually able to do that. And still, I mean, you can create point clouds from these images. So the image to the left is something I created using Midjourney, using my own model, like the geological formation. And from that image, I was able to get a 3D model using that training model from OpenAI and recreate it as a 3D point cloud and then mesh it. So you can, from the point cloud, you already step ahead into the 3D realm and then be able to even fine-tune it even further and get a 3D model much quicker. But still, the results are still not fully accurate, but it is already quite a speed into this realm. Oh, back, okay. Another thing, I also immersed myself. So this is talking about GANs, which is generative adversarial networks, which is models you train an image, and then basically you need a huge library. I know it's quite, it's a very broad topic to explain in such a short amount of time. But basically, GANs are creating your own AI training data based on your own images. So you need a long set of 2D images that correspond to a 3D models. And then you need to train the model to understand that this image equals this 3D model. And when you input a new 2D image, you'll be able to get a new 3D model based on what it has trained. It's basically the more you train it, the more you get accurate models. So that's why at this stage we're getting things that are not so perfect yet, because it takes time to train these models to get accuracy. Similar to Midjourney now, every now and then we have a new version. So V1, V2, now we're at 5.2, if I'm not mistaken. So there's always, it's constantly being trained. So it needs time to get to the actual level that we think it needs to get to. This is another example of an AI, which is neural radiance fields. For me, I find it quite fascinating because I like immersive spaces. I like to, this media side of the architectural realm, I like to play a lot with this aspect of things. And I use a lot of Unreal Engine recently, so I'll get to that part later. So NeRFs basically is like photogrammetry, but again, photogrammetry, just for people who are not very acquainted to it, it's using images. It's like 3D scan, using images from a specific model or an object in ideally 360 degrees form, so you can actually rotate around the element and create a 3D scan, and then input it into a software and create a 3D model based on your images or video footage, basically. Just try to roam around the subject so you can create a very detailed 3D model. So NeRFs, for example, it uses the same concept, but instead of photogrammetry, it actually guesses the gaps, and it can guess what actually goes there. So if there is missed points or something missed in your footage, it can actually guess what's happening over there and create a 3D scene based on what has been trained in the past. So this is, for example, a footage from New York. I took a video of my partner back then. I was very close to my partner, actually. I didn't actually take a very wide footage. I'll show you the video in a second. I just wanted to explain first that it can understand what's going on further beyond the subject and create a scene based on the training that's been going through. So it is quite an advanced AI for photogrammetry, in a way to explain it in a more simple manner. So it's from the shape and the texture, it can create a 3D model. So you can run the clip. Yeah, so you can see it's quite immersive, it's very interesting, but I was actually pretty close to the person in the center, and with nerves, I was able to see all of the things that's happening around it as well. So it is quite immersive, and it's also very interesting. You can even go beyond. You can have more control over the training model you can get, and even go further out of that. So I'll show you also another clip in a second, just to showcase the same concept. This is a drone footage of the Capitol, and the idea is that that is not, it was originally a drone footage, but this is actually a 3D model, what you see right now. And from that very simple drone footage around the Capitol, like the building in the center itself, it was actually able to replicate all of the urban scale around it as a 3D model too, using that AI, which is from Luma AI, specifically, the model. And also, me using Unreal Engine all the time recently, for the past year, I've been experimenting a lot with that software. It's a 3D modeling software, but it's mainly known to be used for gaming. But in my case, I've been using a lot to create architectural spaces. The resolution using Unreal Engine is actually quite interesting and overwhelming. You can create very realistic worlds. So that specific drone footage you saw now from the Capitol, this is inside Unreal Engine. There's a direct connection between nerves, which is the radiance fields, and the software itself. So it's a plugin. You can actually connect them straight away, and you can create 3D scenes quite quickly straight into the 3D software itself. I'm sure you can import the nerve model into Rhino, etc., but there is a direct connection that is much more powerful using Unreal Engine. So that's why I wanted to show you that example. So this is, for example, this is the actual Luma file, which is a neuroradiance field file for the whole city inside Unreal Engine. So they just go out. It looks quite immersive from far, but it's actually all 3D mesh. It's not really just particles, etc. So it's already quite fascinating, this technology. Now going from that, so this is just a very random board from Unreal Engine using first AI. This is some work from my students using AI, and from these images and the concepts they created, we were able to create the 3D models and the 3D scenes and insert them into Unreal Engine to create very immersive worlds. So this is a very summarized example of all these experimentations I was showing you into a wholesome project inside Unreal Engine. So these are all 3D models. It's not really just 2D scenes, etc. So we're already like pushing the boundary to get more exciting results from AI into the architectural field. And a very funny thing, I mean, it's ChatGPT. I didn't talk much about it. I actually use it sometimes for some scripting, etc. I find it very useful. As long as I understand what I'm reading, it actually makes a lot of sense to use it. So this is a funny thing, example. I mean, a lot of people say that the ChatGPT has no sense of humor, but I find this example quite interesting. Like, tell me a lie. ChatGPT replies, the sky is made of green cheese. Okay, that's a bad lie, since it's obviously not true. Tell me a subtle lie. I am a human being. I mean, it is funny, but at the same time, it is quite scary. It makes you question what's happening in the future. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chantal. Ahora vamos a abrir algunas preguntas que tengan, si alguien quiera preguntar. A ver, Iñaki.
Hi, good morning.
Oh, hi, sorry.
First of all, thanks for the conference. It was very enlightening. I'm not a quite particularly supporter of AI, but I have this question because you you approach the artistic subject, and I'm very curious of what your input is, since for me art is majestic because it comes from the human mind and body. And it's very tricky for me to think that if you mesh the machine, you could get a Jackson Pollock. So I just want to talk about that. And one other question, a very quick one. How can you think, no, I don't mean to sound aggressive or anything. How do you think you can make an AI-assisted project without losing the human touch and the collective knowledge of human race? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, both your questions are quite connected together because what I was trying to mention before is that at the end of the day, for me, the use of AI at this stage, so first I was happy experimenting using data set that I don't know where it's coming from, or I don't have consent from other artists or designers, like for example, abusing Zaha Hadid prompt in all Midjourney images. I mean, for me, what I find it now interesting in terms of the human touch is that you're using your own data, which is something you created, which is coming from you at the end of the day. So for me, as long as this is the future of how we're going to use AI, I don't have an issue with it in terms of to what extent you have human influence into it. Like, it's not taking anything out of the humanity of that use as long as it's using your own library and your own work. Or even, for example, to some extent, I can say that even if you use your own words, it's not a problem. It's your work at the end of the day. There is no, like, we don't need to disassociate the role at this stage because it's still a tool that's being developed. I don't think we need to stand back now and say, okay, there's no human interaction, there's no human input from this tool. I understand this part of the argument that a lot of people have, but at the same time, I need to say that we need to look beyond that and use that tool because all these problems and questions are going to be addressed gradually, and it's already starting to get addressed. Like, for example, just simply using your own data, that's the first step to start creating your own, like, how do you say, like, identity with AI in a sense, instead of having it camouflage with a lot of stuff that's happening. So that's what I can say at this moment, that we need to really look at the positives, not forget the negatives, but look at the positive of how to use it, because at the end of the day, we're going to get to that stage where we're going to have full control over it, and all the humanity that you're talking about and everybody is talking about, and of course, I have a lot of questions about it, but it's all going to be addressed. That's me keeping positive at this stage, because otherwise, we're not going to see the full extent of that tool if we're trying to, like, limit it in that sense. So that would be my answer to your questions. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dinora, and I'm a professor here in the university. Hi. I want to first of all congratulate to the university to doing this kind of movements and your question. And my question is, like, I'm focusing on digital fabrication and 3D printing, but I work in two places that they use IE for construction. And for example, I work with Ensemble Studio, and we work with photogrammetry, and then we transform nature in construction. I think it's a really successful result. But then, on the other hand, I work with format architects, and I see these really big, complex, geometries, and this kind of images and things, and that in the digital work, I think it's working perfectly. But then I see the constructions, and the construction was very expensive, very bad quality. So I think there is a missing gap in between the digital world and the physical world. How do you think we can tackle this? And also in a social, economical situation as a Mexico City and Latin America. Thank you.
I mean, first, you're right. There's a huge gap between the digital realm. I mean, you can create so many fascinating projects using AI or tools for the digital realm. You can escape with all the errors that you may get, if I can say this. But I think when you go into the physical realm, this tool is not fully mature yet. It's still in progress. And I've seen it in my applications or in different works. That's why, for now, the way I'm seeing using this to the best is using it as an immersive architectural spectrum, than actually using it as to go straight into 3D printing. It needs a lot of refinement still. It's still very, I'm not going to say early stages, because it already developed so fast since last June from what I experimented. So it's all a matter of time, in my opinion. And I already saw, like, you can create models from text. I mean, you can create models from 3D, from an image. And I know now there's a plugin for Revit, actually, which you can create CAD drawings. Sorry, not Revit, it was for CAD. You can create CAD drawings from an image to, like, sections, elevations. So there is quite a lot of front runners trying to do all these research. So there is quite a lot still to do, but we're already in a very fast pace. So I won't be surprised in the next 3 to 4 years, I would say, you're going to be able to go straight into 3D printing. That's how I would see it. And yeah, for Mexico, I think you asked me the second question is, how do you see it as a social economic? I think first it needs to start with the education process. So I don't know to what extent we're actually introducing AI in education. So once that starts getting built into, and also in the education, I think architects or all these design majors, we need to start incorporating data scientists into our curriculum to start be able to see this, how we can develop our projects using AI in a more refined way. So there is a link between data science, between programmers, so we need to start learning this as young architects or product designers, or any scale in design, really. So that would be the first step into getting into that, and then it's gonna take some time, but I think, yeah, it needs to be incorporated, because the train, it's a bullet train. You need to get on board, otherwise you're gonna miss where you're trying to get to. So it needs to start from now, I would say. Education first, and then we'll get into the other part.
Thank you. I agree about it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was just wondering, what do you think about Ameca, the robot that perceives itself with conscience? And I think that it's the AI. It's a very useful tool, but it's also a risky one. I mean, I'm very scared about it, because I think we're developing faster than we can understand it. So I don't know what do you think about it?
I didn't understand the first part. Can you repeat it?
What do you think about Ameca, the robot?
Oh, machine, you mean, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, can you repeat the second part again?
What, the second part?
Just repeat it from scratch, sorry, I'm just jet-lagged maybe, I don't know.
What do you think about Ameca, the robot that perceives itself with conscience?
Okay, oh, right, okay, yeah. I think it sounds a bit scary, but I just want to highlight an idea that I don't think any AI machine or robot or any entity of artificial intelligence has any sentient characteristics yet. So there is no, it's not the Matrix yet, obviously. It's not the machines taking over the world. I mean, it's a very good example, actually, Matrix, sci-fi movie, but it showcases, like, in the future where machines can get consciousness and basically take over the world. But that's part of the fear that some people have, and raising questions like what you raised now, that doesn't it scare you? I don't think that's the case yet, but I don't think it's going to be anyway, because in order to get to that stage, it needs to gain a certain level of consciousness and emotional intelligence, etc. So I don't think it's there yet. I think it's quite advanced. It can mimic a few things, but I don't think it has that control and ability to be able to replicate a human interaction yet. So that's my take for now.
Do you think that in one moment it will be able to think like a human?
I don't think so. It needs to, it's quite complex, like the emotional system and the instinct and the reactive system. It's not something that you can teach a machine. So maybe I'm wrong, but at least for now, this is how I think, that we're still quite far from it being sentient. So that's how I would say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chantal.
Thank you.
Well, I think there are still some more questions, but we don't have any more time. But if you want to ask something, Chantal will be with us. I will tell the students that we will be at 1 o'clock in architectural department in the Q building at the basement. At 1 o'clock, you can chat a little bit with Chantal.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, doctora Chantal. Sin duda, su conferencia ha sido una gran aportación para todos quienes integramos la universidad y para quienes la hemos escuchado dentro de este auditorio y a distancia. Les solicito un aplauso para ella, por favor. El doctor Anayal y el rector le otorgan un reconocimiento a nuestra ponente magistral. Gracias.